Palestinian Authority was formed as a way to protect Palestinian interests, their security, and their self-determination against Israel's occupation. But over the last few decades, it's come under increased scrutiny, with critics saying it in fact has become the opposite, a kind of subcontractor for Israel to protect its security from the Palestinians. So how does the PA coordinate security in the West Bank? And what is its relationship with Israel's government? On the 13th of September 1993, US President Bill Clinton presided over one of the most dramatic handshakes in modern history. On the White House lawn, the handshake between Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin and the Palestinian Liberation Organization chairman Yasser Arafat was hailed as a political breakthrough that would constitute the dawn of a new era for the Middle East. Dubbed the Oslo Accords, the agreement was the culmination of years of secret negotiations facilitated by Norway and recognized by the PLO in Israel. It committed both sides to instating Palestinian self-governance in limited parts of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which Israel had occupied since 1967. The goal was to set up a Palestinian state within 2 decades. The Palestinian Authority was formed in 1994, pursuant to the Gaza-Jericho Agreement between the PLO and the Government of Israel, and was intended to be a 5-year interim body. Further negotiations were then meant to take place between the two parties regarding its final status. The accords called for the establishment of a Palestinian police force that would, quote, act systematically against all expressions of violence and terror. But the agreement collapsed in 2000, when the Second Intifada erupted across Palestinian territories. Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon launched Operation Defensive Shield in 2002, reoccupying almost all of the West Bank's Area A, besieging Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat and destroying the PA's security infrastructure. Israel then pushed to change the framework and structure of the PA security forces in agreement with the United States and the Middle East Quartet, outlined in a new roadmap signed in April 2003. The weakened and fragile PA began rebuilding and reforming its security sector in 2005. It started by encouraging thousands of existing police officers to take early retirement and recruiting and training new officers to replace them. This was supervised by U.S. Security Coordinator Lieutenant General Keith Dayton, who focused on the gendarmerie-style training of West Bank-based security personnel. Applicants were screened by 4 different intelligence agencies, American, Israeli, Jordanian, and Palestinian, to ensure they had no terrorist links, human rights violations, and/or criminal records. The training took place at the Jordan International Police Training Center near Amman, using the same facilities and trainers who rebuilt the post-US invasion Iraqi police force. The focus of the structure was the maintenance of law and order, crowd control, and the suspension of Palestinian groups and individuals labeled as terrorists by Israel, such as Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. This made Israel's security a de facto priority and added further demands on the Palestinian Authority to act as a security force against individuals and organizations involved in planning or carrying out attacks against Israel.
They actually encouraged all the old guards, let's call them the old guard, to have a early retirement. A lot of them actually left. I mean, why would I be in the security forces if I can actually get the salary while I'm home and I don't have, a lot of people join the security just because there isn't any other employment, not because they want to be security forces. And the second thing is actually they can refresh recruits and mold the mentality based on what America and the United States and other Arab countries want.
Today, there are over 83,000 Palestinian security personnel in the West Bank and Gaza combined, forming one of the highest ratios of security to civilians in the world. Security makes up 45% of the PA's workforce and consumes nearly a third of its annual budget. In 2013 alone, the United States provided $427 million in economic assistance, of which $70 million was allocated specifically to fund the PA's security forces. At the same time, the European Union gave $227 million in direct funding to the authority and a further $406 million in economic aid and support for security forces.
So how much is left for education medical health, academia. I mean, you're focusing. So you're focusing all the Palestinian energy and resources to basically establish a security system that is mostly beneficial to the occupier, not the occupied.
In 2011, a leaked report from the so-called Palestinian Papers showed that from February 2008 to May 2009, the PA arrested 3,700 members of armed groups, summoned 4,700 individuals for questioning, confiscated 1,100 weapons, and seized more than $700,000 belonging to armed groups, and confiscated materials used for inciting violence. The Palestinian Authority's leadership has remained in power for close to 2 decades unchallenged. This has opened them up for sustained criticism from opposition groups and activists over a lack of political transparency and accountability. Elections for the Palestinian National Authority were first held in 1994 and were last scheduled for 2009 but delayed indefinitely due to the Fatah-Hamas conflict. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, was elected for a 4-year term in 2005. 16 years later, no subsequent elections have been held for his successor, with elections limited to local offices only. The PA has since promised to hold elections several times, most recently in 2021, only to delay or call them off weeks earlier. NGOs and human rights advocates have accused the PA of implementing a policy of arrest, torture, and harm towards Palestinian activists and dissidents based on their political affiliation. Nazar Banat, a prominent political activist and human rights defender, was arrested several times on charges of insulting national sentiment and inciting strife against the PA on Facebook. Following a series of widely shared videos in which he was highly critical of the PA and Mahmoud Abbas over COVID policy and delayed elections, his home was raided by security forces in June 2021. He was beaten to death during the raid. Protests erupted across the West Bank in the aftermath of Banat's death and were met with a forceful crackdown by PA police. Since then, reports of mass arrests, torture, and other forms of ill treatment continue to be reported in prisons administered by Palestinian authorities. The Palestinian Authority was intended to be a transitional administration that would expire in 1999 with the formation of a self-governing Palestinian state. But 30 years later, it has become a permanent government without true sovereignty. Security coordination between the PA and Israel has continued, with occasional interruptions during heightened tensions. In 2020, President Mahmoud Abbas suspended coordination in response to Israeli plans to annex parts of the West Bank. In January 2023, he suspended security coordination again after Israeli soldiers killed 9 Palestinians during a raid in Jenin.
So if you want to stop the coordination, that means Israel can actually blackmail you. You will not get the tax revenues, you cannot pay salaries, you will not get enough food into the Palestinian territories. So basically what we're talking about here is a power right for Israel, a way to blackmail the Palestinians. Okay, if you do not coordinate with us, if you do not help us stop attacks, act as our subcontractors within the Palestinian territories, stop people actually attacking the Israeli army and settlers and what have you there, that means we can actually punish you.
Despite the sustained criticism received by the PA for prioritizing Israel's security, a new wave of far-right Israeli lawmakers have placed it in their scopes, promising to dismantle the organization once and for all.
אני רוצה למחוק את הדבר הזה שנקרא רשות. לא פעם, לגבי האנשים, הם יחיו בדיוק כמו שהם חיו לפני שנכנסה הרשות לחיים של כולנו. הרשות, הם יקבלו, הם יהיו מרכזים כאלה שלהם, שהם יתנהלו, אבל לא תהיה אוטונומיה ולא תהיה דבר שנקראת רשות.
This existential threat from Israel's new government and almost daily raids by Israeli forces into Palestinian towns and villages continue to undermine the PA's role in managing its own affairs and convincing Palestinians that it remains their representative voice. In essence, the issue is not about the presence or absence of security coordination, but rather about who benefits the most and at whose expense.
People are growing very frustrated. Land is getting smaller. The prospect of a state almost completely is gone. and Israel is basically descending into complete and full-blown fascism. So the question that remains, can the Palestinian Authority survive?